Hello everybody. Today what we are working on is the Countless Chemical Reaction Lab. So you'll want to grab this one out. It looks a little bit something like this. Please put your name on it if you have not already done so. Put the day that it's due and then what hour you have science class, and this is what it looks like on the back. We're going to work on part 1 right now, and then there's a video that goes with part 2. So first things first, what are we trying to learn from this? Is we want to be able to determine if and when a physical or chemical change has occurred. We also want to be able to prove that matter is conserved in any reaction. So safety, if we would be doing this lab in class or when you go to high school or if we have another lab this year, we don't want to eat or drink any lab materials. We want to make sure we wash our hands before leaving class just in case we have chemicals on our hands. Make sure we wear safety goggles during the entire time we are testing, not mixing any chemicals that are not listed to be mixed. And then also things like if you have like dangling necklaces, your hair is down, you want to have your hair back and just get rid of anything that could fall into the lab workspace. You want to make sure you have closed-toed shoes just in case you would spill. So those are some things to keep in mind for any lab you might have in the future. So what we are doing for this one is we are looking at that part 1 procedure on the front side where we're going to be putting 1 dropper full or 1 squeeze of each of the stated chemicals into the test tube. Then we'll put them back into the correct containers and then rinse out all test tubes if needed and scrub the inside of our test tubes with a test tube brush as we're done. So our first one here is going to be the sodium hydroxide with potassium dichromate. We're going to put 1 dropper full of each of those in. So I've got my sodium hydroxide here. I'm going to get a dropper full. So I got 1 dropper full of sodium hydroxide, and then we need 1 dropper full of potassium dichromate. And as we add this, what do we see happening? And now you've got the ability, if you want to rewind and rewatch that again, you can. But what we want to look at, so this first one I'm going to take a second, like really kind of go through these. The other ones I'll say, but I want to show you. So we need to write down color change to. Well, we had a color change to yellow, so we need to write in yellow. Do we have a precipitate? Precipitate is going to be kind of some chunky stuff. This is completely clear through. And then is there bubbles? Is there any fizzing happening? There's no fizzing or bubbling happening. So we just have a color change to yellow. We would then circle no precipitate, no fizz. If you had any other notes you wanted to add there, you could do that. So then if you need to pause this video at any time, you're welcome to do that. I'm going to move on though. So our next one then is we have copper sulfate and we have sodium hydroxide. So some copper sulfate here. And then we've got sodium hydroxide, which, yes, we did actually just use in our last one. We've got a few of them that are used in more than one. So here is then our sodium hydroxide, and watch as this is added. Can you see we've got kind of some chunky stuff in here? It's become cloudy. So some things we'd want to write down here is it maybe turned a little bit darker blue, but the bigger thing is there's this like chunky stuff hanging out in here. If I kind of try and go like that, can kind of see that chunky stuff that's hanging out in there. And that's what a precipitate is. Yeah, you can see as I got it up on the edge there. That's a precipitate. It's kind of this chunky stuff that comes out of a reaction. So letter C rather, not quite a number, we have acetic acid and sodium bicarbonate. And I guess before I go too far here. So did we have a color change? If you want to put a little bit darker blue, you could. Precipitate, definitely. Any fizzing, we did not. So for this next one, we have acetic acid. You maybe have heard of this before. Acetic acid is actually just vinegar. I bet a lot of you probably even have that at home. So we have acetic acid. And then we have one called sodium bicarbonate. If you bake, very often. You maybe have heard of baking soda, right? Maybe in face class you've done that. So some sodium bicarbonate here. And did we have a reaction? Definitely. So this one, we don't have a color change at all. We don't have precipitate, but we do have bubbles formed. Now, a big thing when we have bubbles formed in a reaction, we do need to be careful because when you boil water, you have bubbles, but it's still water. It's not like you're having a chemical reaction. This one, we're getting a new substance, and that's the key thing with any of these is, do you have a new substance? We have a new substance after these two reacted, and we have bubbles as a result. So we have a chemical reaction. If it's just something like boiling water, though, it's not a reaction. So color change none, precipitate none, bubbles, oh yeah. Next one is we have lead nitrate. So we're going to get a dropper full of lead nitrate here. And I'll add that to our fourth tube. And then we have potassium iodide. Sorry there. I shook you a bit. Watch this one. How cool is that? Now, with this one that we just did we have a color change? Definitely. Go back, replay it if you need to see it again. Do we have precipitate? We do. We're going to see it settle out even more. But a lot of times, if it's become too clear liquids that become cloudy, you probably have a precipitate. And then do we have any bubbling or fizzing? No, we do not. We just have a color change and we have precipitate. But if you look at this, so maybe if I can get some up on the side, you can see there, a little bit there. Ah, we got some precipitate. And as it settles out, if the camera will settle here, do you see how it kind of looks like, I don't know, like almost foamy or something? It's just because like the particles are kind of like powdered sugar. That's the type of precipitate that's kind of coming out of here. You know how powdered sugar is like really fine and there's just air between each bits? I mean, this is liquid that's between each of the bits. But we have a precipitate there, and you can see it settling out. That you see like the chunky stuff, and then we have just the clear at the top. So no fizzing, but definitely a color change and definitely a precipitate there. Yeah, you can even see it here, just as that all settles. It's just kind of like almost powdered sugar looking. And then our very last one, we have ammonium hydroxide, and then we have copper sulfate. And so for this one, we need one dropper full. And then we need the sodium, or the copper sulfate, rather. And watch these two mix, really cool. And if you can kind of see on there, can you see there's like white bits? I'm trying to add it really carefully and really slowly. So did we get a color change? 100% yes. Because this is now a really dark, dark blue. So we definitely have a color change. Do we have a precipitate? So that's why I was trying to add that really carefully. There is some, and it's at the very bottom. Can you see it there? Now, I will tell you, my first two classes that I had, usually we had made this last one, the ammonium hydroxide. If you've ever used like ammonia as a cleaner at your house, you've encountered ammonia. And we kind of watered it down just so we can make it go further. So it just becomes like a really pale kind of a blue. But this year we had left it as full strength and we got this really dark color. And I didn't realize it when I did it with my first two classes, but there's a precipitate on there. Mrs. Carbolina, she was like, our class had this white precipitate. I'm like, what do you mean? Because when it's sitting in here like this, you don't notice it. But she was noticing one student was really kind of careful, just very carefully adding it. And as they were, that's how they were seeing it all fall to the bottom. So there's a white precipitate in here as well, which is really, really pretty. So make sure you've got these. If you want to go back and rewatch any of these, you can. Go for it as many times as you would like to. But then when you're done, you're going to flip over to the other video, which is going to go over the back side, and then turn this in. Make sure on the back side, I'll put a little plug in now. Make sure you add color and have good detail. Otherwise, please, as always, let your science teacher know if you have any questions. Otherwise, have a great day, guys. Bye.